Hi there, Coach Alexa here. Carb loading. So if you go back a good few years now, the standard, I would guess, approach to carb loading before a big race like a marathon, half marathon or an ultra was to eat as much pasta, for example, as you could the night before. And that approach has been rather debunked now. A couple of key reasons for that. One of which is we have quite a small fuel tank for the chemical glycogen, which is what our body breaks carbohydrates down into. It's the fuel that our muscles use. So if you eat loads of carbohydrate, you're going to fill up that glycogen fuel tank really quickly, and any excess carbohydrate that you've eaten is just going to go and get stored as body fat. Also, if you eat loads and loads and loads all in one go for dinner the night before, you're probably still going to be digesting it the following morning, leading to a bit of a kind of heavy stomach feeling, which isn't that helpful. So the evidence these days is more towards a gradual approach of loading in those carbohydrates, 2 to 3 days approaching the event. So all we really need to think about is having carbohydrate as part of every meal, and if you're having snacks throughout the day, in your snacks as well. And maybe just slightly more than usual. So making sure there's a portion of carbohydrate on your plate, maybe a third to a half of the size of that plate of whatever you're eating, alongside some protein, some vegetables, etc. Sources of carbohydrates are things like breakfast cereals, bread, oats, rice, potatoes, pasta, things like couscous and stuff like that as well. So you can get them quite easily, and most people, I would say, are probably having a decent portion of carbohydrate on their plate for most meals and snacks anyway. So it's not something that you need to massively do differently. It's just tweaking things and making sure you tick that box for each meal in those 2 or 3 days before. One other thing to start with to think about when it comes to carbohydrate is that the other thing we want to be maybe reducing slightly in those 2 to 3 days before a race is reducing the amount of fibre in our diet. So if, for example, you're eating, I don't know, high fibre cereals like Weetabix or high fibre sort of fruits and vegetables, you might want to cut those down. So things like dates, prunes and stuff, you might want to just cut those down a little bit in advance of the race. They bulk out your food and they increase our digestive transit, which is usually great, but running also increases our digestive transit. So high fibre foods in the couple of days before the race may make it more likely for you to need a poo on the way round, basically. A few other dietary kind of tips in those 2 or 3 days before a race. One is staying hydrated, so drinking little and often, aiming for a colour of wee that's around a light straw colour, not any darker, to make sure you're properly hydrated. Avoiding, if you can, foods that are harder to digest, so higher fat or very spicy foods that are just going to be a little bit more of a challenge on your digestion. And also staying off the booze for at least a few days, if not a week or 2 before your key race, will really, really help performance. So I hope that's debunked the previous myth of carb loading, giving you a bit more information about what to do there. Enjoy, if you're running the London Marathon this weekend, your week of tapering and rest and recovery and eating good nutrient and carbohydrate rich foods.